Welcome to Ponytails and Peptalks, the podcast where blowouts, breakdowns, and breakthroughs are a weekly discussion. I'm your host, Regina. For over 3 decades, I've been behind the salon chair as a stylist, an owner, and yes, your favorite unlicensed therapist. I have heard it all. The tears, the triumphs, the you won't believe what just happened stories from courageous women overcoming incredible obstacles. So let's meet one of them right now on Ponytails and Peptalks. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ponytails and Peptalks. I'm your host, Regina. I hope you tuned in to part 1 of Rita Weber, A Happy Old Lady. Today is going to be part 2, and Rita shows us that it doesn't matter how old you are, if you are still breathing, there's a purpose and a plan for your life. Last week, we learned that she grew up in a Christian home. She had a thirst for knowledge that drove her parents crazy. She went off to college, became a microbiologist. She got married. She had her first child, and then cancer came, and it was a surprise, but she overcame it. Later, she had another child, got cancer again, and she overcame it again. However, then her husband got cancer. Kind of not fair sometimes, it seems, that in one family, so much can happen that isn't so great, but they endured. However, Rita's husband, Joe, did not fare out so well. He passed away. So Rita talks about grief and some of the things we just really don't even understand, and how, we're just not thinking. And there are things like she back through the garage door without even opening it. She got a speeding ticket going 90 miles an hour and just in tears. And there are so many things that we go through. Then Rita was like, okay, what's next? What do I do now? She goes off to Bible college in Germany. She gets a degree there. She decides to go after that. No, she went to England and then went to Germany. And then her parents were not doing well, so she came back home to take care of them. And after they passed away, she was like, okay, what now? She's much older now. And she decided to go in not too far from here and go back into some more Bible studies. But the fun thing that Rita did was she stunned her professor while she was in England and asked him this insane question. And she said, is there ever a time that God owes us an apology? You know what? That's a pretty fair question, because sometimes so many things in life happen and we're just not sure, did maybe God owes us an apology? But wait till you hear what the answer was. Listen today as Rita tells the rest of her story, and her story will still continue as she is still breathing and she is not done yet. Enjoy today's episode, guys. It's a fun one.
I think really for most of those years from when I got saved to then, I had more of a deal than a relationship with God. I knew I was saved. I knew He loved me, and I had kind of said to Him, not in so many words, but with my attitude, that thank you, Lord, I don't have to go to hell. I'm going to get to go to heaven when I die. And in the meantime, I'll try to
Uh-huh.
stay out of trouble so you won't be mad at me. And
Right.
I'll call you if I need you. And
Yeah.
otherwise, I'll see you at the pearly gates.
There you
And,
go.
that was my attitude towards God. I really didn't have
Yeah.
a walking every minute with Jesus relationship at that. Only when I needed Him,
Right.
when I got in
Yeah.
trouble. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And their emphasis is that we cannot live the Christian life. Only
Hmm.
Christ can live it through us.
Through
And
us. Yeah.
that's what I learned, that it's a minute to minute relationship. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. And while I was there, God finally brought me face to face with Himself
Yes.
and my attitude about Him, because I had been very mad at God. Joe had been prayed for by people all around the world for healing, and he he had died, and I was unhappy with God, and so I mean, I wasn't stupid enough to turn my back on him because you know, but I was not always very nice to him. I was kind of rude at times. I didn't stop
Yeah.
speaking to him, but it was a very strained relationship, kind of like somehow sometimes wives and husbands do that to each other. They stay married, they stay living in the same house, but they're not real cordial. Well,
Right.
I was not
Hmm.
very cordial with the Lord. And November the 1st, 19 no 2000 2001, I got to England 5 days after, I mean, no, before 5/11 and 9/11.
Nine
So
11.
it
Yeah.
was that year. It was 2001 or
Yeah.
anyway. So it was November the 1st, and I went into the lecture hall early, and there were books on every desk, one book on each desk, and it was
Hmm.
it was about this big. It had a bright green cover on it, and I went immediately to my desk and picked
Yes.
it up and looked at it, and it was Oswald Chambers, my utmost for his yeah,
Highest.
my utmost
Highest.
for his
Hmm.
high, and
Yes.
so I turned to November the 1st, as you do when you look at a book that has
Yes,
dates in it,
absolutely. Oh, yeah.
and it was he was talking God was talking about um well, the verse was 1 Corinthians 6:19. Do you not know that you are not your own?
Mhm.
I was mad at Joe I'm mad at God for taking Joe away from me. Probably I was mad at Joe
Sure.
too.
Yeah. Mm.
um and I knew that God was asking me to tell him thank you for
Mm.
taking Joe's life, and
Wow.
I had not
That's
been
tough.
able to do it. I just couldn't go there. And so, but that's
I'm not sure
exactly
I
what
could
this
have.
was about. So
Hmm.
he says, why should we not experience a heartbreak? Through those doorways, God is opening up ways of fellowship with his son. Most of us collapse at the first grip of pain. We sit down at the door of God's purpose and enter a slow death through self pity. And all the so
Oh.
called Christian sympathy of others helps us to our deathbed. But God will not. He comes with the grip of the pierced hand of his Son, as if to say, enter into fellowship with me, arise and shine. If God can accomplish his purposes in this world through a broken heart, then why
Hmm.
not thank him for breaking yours?
Oh, wow.
And that
Wow.
was like, I mean, it was like I just, getting whacked in the face. It was like, oh my gosh, what have I been
Yeah.
doing? And so
Yeah.
there was no one else in the room. It was 5 minutes until class was supposed to start, and nobody but me was in there. And I kept thinking, where is everybody? Surely I'm not the only. But I
Right.
think God held the doors closed. So I stood up and I said, Lord, I know you were asking me to thank you for Joe's death. And I said, I have to be honest with you. I don't feel thankful. I
Hmm.
don't. I don't feel thankful at all. But I I will I will say thank you. Well, I will say thank you to you, because you asked me to, and because I want to be obedient, and because I can't live this way anymore. So I said, I thank you for Joe's death. And it was, and then I think I went into a vision because I'm sure that
Mm.
nothing else changed, but it was like all of a sudden there was light, and I could see in color. And I didn't
Hmm.
realize that I had been living in such a dark place for such a long time.
Wow. Wow.
And
But
yeah,
because of your obedience to something
yes,
I can't even imagine having to say, yeah, God opened that back up, let you know how much that he loved you and that
yeah,
it was all going to be okay.
yeah.
Mm. I was interested in a question, because we all question life whenever these things happen, and whether it's death or divorce or whatever it is, any of these circumstances in our life. And you went to the pastor principal and asked him a question that stumped him so much that he had to think about it. What was
Yeah.
that question?
Yes. That poor man. Because he had never, I mean, I've been there a week or so, and he didn't know me from Adam's ox. I mean, there were 180 people
Yeah,
looking at him every day, But I went into
right.
his office and introduced myself, and we shook hands, and I said, "Do you think there's ever any occasion when God should apologize to one of his children?" And he looked at me, and his face just kind of went blank. It was like,
Yeah,
"Hello, are you
like
in there?"
what?
He said, "I've been a pastor for 50 years, and I've been principal of this school for 25, and no
Yeah,
one has ever asked me that question before."
right.
And he sat there a little while longer. And then he got up, walked over to a bookcase, and handed me Weatherhead's book on the will of God. Is what it's the an
Okay.
English author. It's a classic work on the will of God. And he said,
Yes.
"Go read this, and then come back and we'll discuss this." So
Oh.
I just said thank you very much and left. And over the next couple of weeks, I read it again and again and again. And you know, and after that, I really didn't have any more questions. I mean, it was perfectly
Oh,
clear.
it answered
Uh,
everything you needed to know.
that everything I needed to know. The answer to my question was no. It's,
Right.
it's never
Because there's always
necessary
a
for God to
reason.
apologize.
Yeah, yes.
So, I went
Because
back
his
and gave him his book back and told him, and we had a really good conversation. And he and I correspond still. He's
Oh, good.
become a very good friend to me. He is a very wise man. He's retired now. He and his
Uh-huh.
wife were just lovely people. So,
Yes.
yeah, that was. So I left with those all my questions answered, and my heart put back together, and I was ready to live again. So
Right.
and then I
So
went to
from
Germany. Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask. Then you got
yeah.
sent to Germany after that. What happened while you were in Germany?
Well, um, the principal of the school called and said, I asked some students what would make Bible school better for them, and they said we would have liked to have had an older English speaking woman to talk to, because everybody
Uh,
there, all the staff spoke German. And he said, and I met you, and when because he had been there lecturing, and we had sat at the same table for lunch, but we didn't have a conversation. It was just I just happened to be there with all these other with students. And he said, God brought your name to mind when I was saying, who am I going to. And so he said, would you like to come here and be that older English speaking woman? What I wanted to say was, no, thank you. I don't want to come to Germany. I had a very bad
but
taste
the
in my
words.
mouth about Germany,
Yeah,
because I was
yeah.
born during World War II and had heard,
Oh.
anyway. But God said, remember, you said last night that you would do the first thing anybody asked you to do. Where you were
Oh.
going to go next. So I had
Mm-hmm.
kind of already backed myself into a corner. So I said, well, yes, I would love to do that.
Can't
And,
wait.
I went back to Texas and informed my family that no, I wasn't coming home for good. I was going to go live in Germany. And,
Right.
and I went. And when I got there, my picture was on the wall in the hall with all the other staff who were there. And it had
Hmm.
our titles underneath them, our job. And I looked under
Right.
my name, and it said mentor and encourager. And
Ah, yeah.
I nearly fainted. I really did. I thought, I don't know anything about being a mentor and encourager. But anyway, that's what I
You're like,
was.
have you
And
met me?
yeah, I mean, I prayed and
Uh,
God came through. He really did.
yes,
I
because
mean,
you had an
I,
incident with a lady there, a young lady
yeah.
there. What
It was
happened
a
with
young
that?
woman who was there
Hmm.
who she was just out of high school, And she had been living the last few years in a boarding school because her parents were missionaries in a very difficult area. And they
Oh,
sent her to
okay.
this boarding school thinking she would be safe and get a good education. And
Right.
instead, she was assaulted by a member of the staff.
Oh, oh,
And
oh no.
then, when she reported it, he lied and said it didn't happen, and they believed him. They believed
Yeah,
their personnel. So her
yeah.
heart was just broken. She was traumatized, and she was cutting herself. And she
Mm-hmm.
showed me. I'd never seen anything like that before. She
Yeah.
rolled up her sleeve, and her arm was covered with scabs and wounds from her wrist to her elbow.
Wow.
And I said, how did you do this? And she said, well, I have knives. And I said, did you bring anything with you to hurt yourself here? And she said, yeah, I
Yeah.
brought my knives. I
Oh,
said, and I was winging it. I mean, I had prayed
yeah.
and I had no idea what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And she said she had these knives with her. And I said, I said, well, I'd like to see the knives. And so she went
Hmm.
and got them. And they were
Hmm.
ugly, ugly, demonic looking things. It was not just a knife.
Oh,
They had hooks on the end
oh,
where they would, oh,
interesting.
it's terrible. And I
Oh.
said, honey, I said, why don't you just leave those with me during this
Mm-hmm.
school year? And I'll give them back to you at the end of the year if you still want them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then we prayed. I had never, ever even thought about that situation. And I was saying to the Lord, all the time I was talking to her, I was
Mm-hmm.
praying, and words came out of my mouth, and they did whatever they needed to do because she
Yeah.
said, okay. She said, I can do that. And so the rest of for the whole school year, I kept an eye on her. I saw them
Mm-hmm.
all every day. Her roommates loved her. She loved them, and she told them all about it. And they ministered to her. It was, and I could tell she was doing well. She wasn't
Good.
sad looking. And the last day of school, she came and said, "Can I get my knives back now?" And I said, "What are you
Ah,
going to do with them?" She said, "My
yeah.
roommates and I are going to take them to the lake, which was right down the street, and throw them in." I said, "That sounds
Oh,
wonderful. Can I go
wow.
too?" So I went with
Yes.
her,
I want to
and they
see
threw
this.
those knives in the lake, and that was the end of it. You know,
Wow. She just needed to know someone cared, someone wanted to pray with her about this, and that sounds like she was ready to surrender to someone that cared. So that makes for gosh, such a beautiful story.
yeah,
So now your parents become ill and you get called back to come to back to the States.
yeah. It was after I had left Bodenseehof. At the end of the school, the second year I was there. I realized it was, it's time for me to go home because I knew my mother wasn't doing very well. Well, I didn't really know why, but Emily and her cousin, who were kind of in charge of the
Yeah.
grandparents while I was gone, were letting me know things were kind of strange. And so I thought, well, I better go home. So actually, I had planned to go back to Cape and Ray Hall, and I was actually there, and I thought they had asked me if I wanted to stay for the school year and be up on the staff, and I had said
Mhm.
yes. But Emily called me and said that my daddy was very sick and I needed to come home, and
Mhm.
so you know that was in the morning, and by the end of the day, I was back in Burning because there's a six
Wow.
hour time difference.
Wow.
So I was able to get home the same day that I got the
That you
news.
left.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my dad was military, so we were going to the base and he was having tests. They thought that he had like some kind of cancer and intestinal or pancreatic or something. So we're doing all these
Mm,
tests.
right.
They couldn't find any tumors. They couldn't find anything. And they just kept looking and looking. And finally, they did do cancer and found that he had a blocked bile duct. And
Oh,
they
okay.
fixed that and he was fine. So, we were just
Wonderful.
waiting for him to get healed up and we'd go home. And I was out in
Yeah.
the hallway with mother one day while he was having some kind of test. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden she looked at me and she said, "Tell me again why we're here."
Oh,
And
you're like,
I
that
mean,
doesn't sound
oh my,
good.
the first word that popped into my mind was Alzheimer's,
Right. Yeah.
And then I
As
went home. I took her home, and Daddy came home, and we were all just, trying to get back to normal. And I talked to my daughter. I said, and told him what, had
what you
happened. And
found.
she said, like Thanksgiving, she poured the giblet gravy into the iced tea pitcher,
Oh
and some other
no.
things she had done. And I said, like burn up a microwave because she put her coffee in there for 3 minutes and set it for 3 hours and
Oh.
things like that. Emily had been
Yeah.
handling them for my dad because he was crippled. I mean, he could walk, but it wasn't, easy. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I I took her to my doctor because I felt somebody needed to do something. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
told him what had happened with the question, and she asked me and about the tea and everything. And he did the clock test. The one they do. You're probably not
Oh.
old enough to have the clock test yet, but they have you draw a picture of a clock, and then they'll tell you hour what tell you a time they want you to put the hands in, and you do
Oh
that.
yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
other test is they give you 3 or 4 words, and then
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes later they ask you what they were. Well, mother,
I'm not sure I could pass that now,
yeah,
so I don't know.
yeah. Well, you know what I do? I make up a sentence with them in there. And
Yes.
so I can remember them. But anyway, um, we did that, and mother failed both those tests. And he said, yeah, it looks like Alzheimer's. And so he
Yeah.
put her on Aricept. He said, this won't cure it, but might slow it down a little bit. And
Right.
so, we went home and started preparing to live with, that. And,
Right.
um, and I just decided, that was what was going to be my life from however long it took. So, and it was
Mm-hmm.
8 years. She lived for 8 years after that, and
Wow.
then my dad just lived one more year. So I stayed
Mm-hmm.
with him, during that last year because he was not in real good shape either. And
I love what you had said. He had asked you, he's like, why am I still here? And I,
oh,
I
he
loved your
he
answer
he's the
to
one that
that.
said that. Yeah, he
Yeah.
said that
Yeah.
after mother
Right. He
died.
said that. Yes. But what did you tell him in return, though?
Well, one night I heard him fall, and
Mm-hmm.
I was already in bed in another room, but I heard him hit the floor. So I
Oh.
went in there, and mother was gone by then. She passed away the end of August that year, and well, after
Mm-hmm.
8 years.
Yeah.
And so I've been there 8 years. She passed away, and that a few months later, my dad fell. So I went in there to try to get him, up off the floor. It was the middle of the night, and
Mm-hmm.
he was thinner, but he was still a very big man. So
Yeah.
we struggled and struggled and struggled, and probably 45 minutes. Finally, got him up on the bed, and both of us just collapsed, and we were just.
Sweating,
And my dad
struggling.
looked at me and he says, "Why can't the Lord just go ahead and take me home?"
Right. Yeah.
And my filters were out, so I was tired. My mouth open, and I said, "Well, maybe God wants to be in charge a while longer."
Yeah.
and, and he laughed.
Oh,
That
that's
was the last
precious.
time I ever heard my dad laugh because
Oh,
he got sick. He broke his hip shortly after that
yeah.
and
Yeah.
went to the hospital, and they were going to try to fix his hip, but he
Uh-huh.
was having heart problems, AFib, and
Mm,
kidney failure, which he had
yeah.
not
Too
had.
many other things.
And
Yeah.
so he was in ICU, and he was the only patient in there, and this young male nurse was in there taking care of him, and he shaved my dad, and cleaned him up and
Oh,
everything, and he was so sweet with him. But dad was
oh,
unconscious, except you could tell he was in pain because he was,
oh,
wiggling and
because his body.
this making,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, can't you give him something to make him more comfortable? And he
Yeah.
looked at me and he said, is that what you want for your dad? And I said, well, of course it is.
Yeah.
And he said, He said, "Then what are you doing in here?"
What did he mean by that?
Well, it's, what came to my mind right then was the fact that my dad had signed a DNR. And I knew, the only reason they wouldn't let him have pain medication is because that would slow down, them figuring out what was wrong with him so they could operate on him. And and I knew that Daddy wouldn't have wanted that had he been able to say, he was a Christian. And Mother wasn't there anymore. And as far as he was concerned, his job was over. He was ready to go. He had no reason to be there. So that it was like that guy kind of smacked me in the face and made me think, because I was just going along with the program, doing what the doctor said, and I thought, well, what are we doing here? They just want to operate on him. He doesn't want that. So I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. What am I doing here, and what can I do about it? He said, our unit director, Dr. So and so, is real good at working with hospice and doing things like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, please go get him. And so that was like noontime or something. By that evening, they had a hospital bed at our house, Daddy's house, and they had a nurse there, and they put him in an ambulance, and we took him
Yeah.
home. I
Yeah.
called my two sisters who were they lived out of town. Said, this is what I think we should do, and they both
Yeah.
agreed with me. And so we took him home, and he lived 3 days, and then he died.
Mm. He
And I,
probably
I
died
think
where he
that
was
he had just,
comfortable.
decided,
Hmm.
okay, this is it. I don't need to be here anymore. I did my part, and he was gone.
That's right. Rita, there's so much more to your story, so much more. I want to encourage the listeners to get your book that's on Amazon, and it's called In Notes from a Happy Old Lady. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a short book, but man, is it packed with, life. And, it didn't even end here. You had a couple more moves. You did some other teaching. God was still not done with you yet. And I'm sure God still is not done with you yet. As long as you're breathing, God is never done with you. The premise of what you wrote about in this book too was to show the grace and mercy and love of God
That's right.
that's been on your life. What would you want the world to know about your amazing God in just a couple of sentences?
The first thing I think is important about God is to know that God is love, and that
Mm-hmm.
everything he does, the reason for it is always love.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it might not seem like love to us,
Right.
but God, who sees the future, knows, and he always does everything out of love.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I learned that was been so important to me is about the verse, which I had read. I mean, I've been to Bible school. I've read the Bible through and through several times. That's one of their main things.
Oh,
But the
sure.
verse that says the will of God is good and acceptable and perfect.
Mm, yeah.
And I decided that verse was absolutely true in my life
Mm-hmm.
and in the world. And that if I believed that, there was absolutely no reason for me to be afraid
Mm-hmm.
or disturbed or,
Wow. Wow.
unhappy, really. I mean, I don't
Right.
always like what God does, but I know now that I can have peace about it because I do believe that. I believe his will is good
Yeah.
and acceptable and perfect. And who am I to
Right.
argue
Who are
with
we?
God?
Because his ways are not our ways,
That's
as
right.
bad
His
as we
ways are
want them
not
to
our
be.
ways. And
So
besides
that's a
that, does
good.
it do any good? No.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. So, I mean, that's a good lesson to learn that, when things are happening and to you or around you, to remember that it's
Mhm.
happening for you as
Yeah,
well. And
that's
then
right.
if that's the way it's playing out, and it's like, okay, God, help me with these feelings through it. I know it's your plan,
Yeah.
but I'm here to listen. Rita, thank you for telling your story. It was beautiful. So, guys, don't forget to go on Amazon, order your book. Thank you for being with us here today, and I'll see you next Wednesday on Ponytails and Pep Talks.